idea.
All right, we are recording now. So this is going to be Israel walking us through the newly updated NetSuite models that we have from FiveTran.
Yes, sir. So the NetSuite models are organized into base and XF folders. So the base folders, pursuant to our SQL style guide, the base folders, these are the only models that are allowed to reference our raw data. So all these models, most of them will reference raw data. But like an XF model, you wouldn't ever see an XF model reference a raw data table. So we have all these models, accounting periods, and if you look here, what the base model does, it's really just like casting, just kind of doing some data manipulation, casting columns and renaming columns is the main thing to kind of get our data formats kind of documented and prevent errors from data type errors, and then kind of getting the snake case naming of the columns. So that's what you'll see with a lot of these. Same thing for accounting periods, NetSuite accounts. These things are referencing up here. They're referencing the raw data up here. This guy here, NetSuite budget category, same thing. And these names of the models are the exact names of the raw data tables prefixed with NetSuite. So if you go to NetSuite raw data, you'll see a budget category, accounts, accounting periods. You'll see consolidated exchange rates. So these are all pulling in all the stuff we need to build out the NetSuite P&L. So you'll see all those. So then once we kind of bring in all these, there's customers, there's currencies, there's departments, subsidiaries, the transaction lines, transactions, and vendors. We haven't used vendors yet for anything, but I figure at some point this may come in useful at some point, but we're not using it just yet. As I was playing around building it, I brought that in, but we haven't necessarily needed it yet. Okay, so we have all those. So that's step one. So think about those ones I just went over. That's like our base data layer. And then the next step, what we need to do is we need to build out a few XF models to transform some of these base tables into something that we can use. So one model that we built is the NetSuite Accounts XF model. And what this model does, it references that base account, which we did up here. It references it, and then it does some logic to build out parent account ID, parent account number, and unique account number. And this accounts for the parent-child relationship that happens in NetSuite. So this logic here gets us nice, clean columns on these where we can group on them, and then the results will make sense. So that's why we have this NetSuite Accounts XF model. Then we have a NetSuite Departments XF model, similar thing, where it references the NetSuite base model. And then we also have logic here to account for parent-child relationships so that we can group on parent department ID and then parent department name. So if we want to roll up to that level, now we have that grouping, and that's going to work beautifully in the data. So that's what that one does. And then we have.
Hey, can we go back to that really quick? Can we name the CTE something other than Ultimate Department?
Yes, we can, and that's an easy fix. So we can name it Parent Department. Good call. Great. And the good thing is that does not change anything. We just hit Control Save on that guy. So my unstaged change came there. And the only thing I need to do now is go down here and change it here. And then the model, it will still run. So that's perfect. Good call out. Thank you. Beautiful. So the next thing we did, and that was a good point, Chase. So in all this, we moved away from that ultimate business and just went to parent. So that's a nice loose end there to tie out. So then we have the NetSuite Transactions XF model. And what this does, I may want to change these aliases. Sometimes in the data team, we like to have this long, we don't like to alias with the short letters, where to me, this seems a little harder to read. I would prefer this one as like, transaction lines, like TL or something for transaction. Yeah. But they like to do this in the style guide. But what this model is doing is taking the transaction lines from up here, which is kind of our starting point to roll up all our transactions, and it's doing a few more transformations. And mainly what we're doing here is masking contractor information because that's PII and we don't want to expose that to anyone. So that's what this logic is doing right here. It is masking and suppressing any kind of PII there. So in our in the final, we'll get here, but in the final model that we'll be querying, the memo is going to be this memo that's exposed, which is masking the contractor, any kind of sensitive contractor information. So that's probably the most important thing this NetSuite transaction lines XF model is doing for us.
Is it better to mask it here or in the base model?
That's a good question. So let's see. It's joining. It's looking at accounts. So it's needing a few things to do that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's needing a few things to do that magic. So it's looking at accounts and subsidiaries. So, and then we have it in the XF here. So what'll happen is everything in this XF will be in the analytics schema. And the idea of the analytics schema, as you know, Chase, is that's where we go to a curated schema where that's specific for building visualizations in Periscope. So I've kept that there just so that if for whatever reason we want to query the transaction lines, you know, maybe probably won't because we have something that's even better than that to query, but be that as it may, that's where we are right now. So that's kind of the next step. So we built some base tables from the raw data. Then we made some XF models to transform some of those base tables to make them more useful for us for our aggregation. And then the next thing we did was we built the base COGS and EPEX, the actuals, COGS, OPEX, and the actuals income. And these are very similar models. The only difference is the account filter. And during the code review, you know, this is where I'm expecting Taylor to have some feedback to say, hey, maybe do this a little differently, do that a little differently. Not necessarily, it's more from a style perspective. There's a very unique, distinct way that the data team does and wants to kind of be consistent with it. So, but I don't expect nothing major, but there's always something he'd like us to do a little differently. So here's what this model does. So it pulls from the NetSuite transactions, which we have. We didn't need to do any transformations for that. It pulls from the transactions lines XF, accounting periods, accounts XF, subsidiaries, departments XF, and consolidated exchange rates. And then I also bring in some date details here as well, so we can have some date columns. So now in the final model we'll be querying, we'll have the fiscal year, fiscal quarter name, which will be useful when we build out some charts. So we have that in there. And then Chase, this is the core. This is what you were super helpful that you provided this. This is what you sent to me. But what I did was just change it around to reference, you know, just change around the references. So it references these things that we built out, that we have that logic built out, and to get more of the stuff we need. But this is the base of what you gave me. You know, this join is exactly the join that you gave me that we aligned on from transaction lines, transactions. So I didn't mess with any of that. Just change with the references. These are the fields that you wanted to bring in. So we brought all those in. Note this memo is coming from transaction lines, which is masking our contractor information, PII. So we're covered there. And then we just bring in a bunch of stuff. It's a ton of columns right now, admittedly so, probably 19. Yeah, we're grouping on 19 things, but all these things are useful, can be useful. And I just have them in there for now, just to have them there. You know, at some point in the future, if we say
I think
we don't. Yeah,
one thing that we may want to look at before we push this to production is I need to look at the memo field, because the memo in NetSuite, you can have a memo field is kind of like a note field that describes the vendor or like the person the entity that we're paying back. Sometimes that it's noted in the memo field as the entity, but then sometimes it's reference somewhere else. So in the past, we did a coalesce to where we had entity or memo. I need to go back and look to see if that's going to be something that we need to do before this gets pushed in production. Because ultimately, I want to be able to have this in a way that we could do like vendor analysis and vendor reporting off of.
Perfect. Yep. And I think that's what may be happening here when it's looking at the account name, but we could certainly go back and just make sure we're happy with the way that's working.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we can test that out here in a little bit.
Yep. Certainly. Yep.
Okay.
And it's similar. Let me show you really quickly. NetSuite Stitch, journal entries, non-journal entries. Yeah. So here's where it was working at before.
Yeah. See, it's describing the entity name there and not the memo field, and
Okay.
I think that's the difference.
Okay. That'd be an easy fix.
Yeah, it would be a coalesce on the entity. So the entity name would be what we would want to coalesce first, and then it would be the memo field. But
yeah,
I say that we may want to bring in both. We may want to just bring in both just to have them, rather than having a coalesce and only provide us one back. I think maybe having two would be more valuable.
So you're adding another column?
Yeah, I think adding the entity name would be the second step. The entity name is going to sometimes be null. The memo field is going to sometimes be null, but there should be one or the other.
Maybe let's just bring it in. That's going to be an easy.
Yeah, I think so.
That'll be easy to do. And fortunately, I have the testing template built out. I can test that bad boy in 10 minutes now. I've got it set up, so no big deal. And I'm that's the thing about me. If I make that change, I'm gonna test it again. That's me. But I can test it in less than 15 minutes. So that's
okay. Cool.
Yeah,
sounds good.
No worries. Yes, sir. All right, good call out. I'm glad we're doing this model review because that's super important, right? Let's not
for sure.
More work down the line. Okay, so beautiful. So let's go back to this actuals COGS OPEX model. So this kind of rolls everything up, gets us everything we need. And then this guy right here, what this guy is doing here, and I'm just making this unique account name column. This may not be the best place to put it, but I've got that working here right now for the time being. Taylor may ask me to do that a little differently if he were to ask me to change something. And then what the other thing this guy is doing here is the income statement grouping. So this is where we get that cost of sales and expense. So we get that categorization there. And then this guy is also doing the cost category. So we have a macro built here that populates the cost category for us.
Okay.
So that's what this CTE does. And then, and then we're filtering out, and I thought about this, Chase, we're filtering out these accounts, and, you can filter them out here or filter them out in the visualization. And I thought to myself, well, we're about to be building a ton of visualizations. These accounts right now aren't in scope for analysis, but maybe in the future point they will be. So, on the one hand, if you filter it out here, it makes it easy in Periscope where you don't have to add that filter every single place and tell people to remember to add that filter. But then at the same time, if you change, on the other hand, if we change at some point and say we want this analysis, and then we have to remove this filter, then all of a sudden, then you got to go back to Periscope and add the filter in to get the visualization and display right.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because, for example, 7, 9, and 8, 0. Like we're not gonna use that in any analysis that we do. That's something strictly for accounting intercompany transfers.
Yep.
We're not really gonna be looking at that, but 7, 7 we would. That's stock compensation. At some point, we want to be able to look at that and understand the implications that we're gonna have with that, especially the question we get to go public. But for right now, we don't need it. Like we're not necessarily analyzing that as a whole for COGS and OPEX quite yet. So I'm fine leaving it out for now, but I think at some point down the road we're gonna whether we create another model specifically for stock comp or pull this in. we
Yep.
can talk about it at that point in time. But yeah, I think right now to your point, it's out of scope, so we can leave filter it out for now.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So that's what this guy is doing. And once we go through code review, this is where I would expect Taylor to maybe say do some things a little differently, but it won't be a big deal. I'll be able to fix it really quick, test it really quick, and we'll get that done. Here's the income model. So it's the exact same. It was rinse and repeat from the COGS, but the only differences are we have a filter here for the income accounts, and then the in the data, the income values come in as a negative number. So this just transforms it to a positive number, so it looks the same on like it comes in NetSuite. And then also create the income statement grouping for it, so you can group by that. And then there is no cost category for income, of course, but I put NA, and this helps us union those two models together. So just kind of keep the union all.
I've got one suggestion on when we're hard coding the case win on the account number.
Yes,
sir. Can we lowercase the I and income, and then, or basically just lowercase all the character values in that? I mean, I know the 1, 2, yeah, the 1, 2, and 3 are going to be character values, and we can't lowercase those. But just yeah, exactly.
All right, so do that, and then let's go back here. Do the same thing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. And then that it'll just make it better for filtering and stuff. Won't prevent any weird things that might happen from that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Perfect. And that's what that guy's doing. And then on this guy, we're filtering out 4005. We're saying that's out of scope. I think that's another intercompany something or another. So,
yeah, I should know what that is, but I don't know what it is right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I should too. That's one of the things we'll keep at it. Okay, perfect. So that's what that guy does. And then the next big guy we built are the budget. So the budget is very similar to the other guys, except we're going to use the budget and budget category models to build this guy out. And we'll join all the account information and departments and all that good stuff. Actually, this subsidiaries looks like I'm not using that subsidiaries anywhere. I could probably just delete that. That's just wasted space. Yep, we're not using subsidiaries at all because there's no foreign currency conversion in.
Yeah, we're not budgeting right now by subsidiaries.
Yep. So we don't need that. That's just wasted space. So let's change that. So boom. So now it's kind of rolling it up, getting all the similar dimensions that we need. And then, so there is no budget for income, and I was playing around with this. So at first I said, let me do
not yet. Yeah. There may be though. It's not necessarily a budget, but we have the ability to be able to forecast what we planned. And we may want to start adding that to NetSuite. It's something I've got built out in our templates, but I haven't actually loaded the forecast to be able to see how well we track. Probably we'll start doing that this upcoming year, or like when we go through this next planning phase, because I think it's going to be really critical for us to be able to have that data and be able to reference that in our data warehouse when we're talking about sales forecasting with the sales team or the marketing team or anybody like that.
Perfect. Yep. And then, so to your point, so I was playing with it now and saying, build out something and just hard code at 0 for the income. I said, well, maybe if that situation arises where we do want to have that in there so we can compare forecasts and bounce stuff off sales, we could just build another one of these and build a budget income model, and then just union these two together and then it'll be combined. So that could be a way to approach that.
Okay.
Once we do that. So that's what this guy does, and it checked out. The key here when we visualize is, this budget category, there's a bunch of stuff in there. So we'll have to filter on that. And then as I was thinking through it, there's no good way to filter in here and not lose information. So I was thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice if you could just filter here to what you wanted and then join it all here together. So in Periscope, you could have one model with your income, your actuals, your forecast, and your budget. But then as I was thinking through it and playing with it, it becomes challenging to filter here. You kind of get stuck into a filter here. And, as you're loading new plans, new budgets. So I thought, well, let's just keep it like this. And then in Periscope, we have the flexibility to build stuff out to say, you filter on whichever forecast or budget that you want.
Yeah, I definitely think exposing it to Periscope and then filtering it there is the better way, because we're going to want to be able to see those different budget categories. Like we're going to want to be able to see what the actuals were, what we planned for, and then months moving forward, like what the forecast is going to look like.
Perfect. We're aligned there. And then because of that, there's no good way to join this budget to the income right now. Well, I think you could do it, but then it gets a little bit more complex with case statements and it's just, it's just not a great way to do it. So, to join the budget and forecast to the actuals, we're going to have to do it in Periscope, which is okay. That's okay. So that's the
budget. I think I think it would be easy if we were to pull in the budget the reason it's probably hard to do now is because that data doesn't exist in the budget category. If we were to load the incomes, that's stupid. if we were to load the income line items, then that would be exposed like in our data warehouse, but it's not. So it's like it doesn't exist. But yeah, I think we could do it later on, but we'll have to, it's out of scope for this, what we're doing here.
Got it. Sounds good. And then the final magic, and this is going to be my favorite, probably one of our favorite models. So this guy, that budget OpEx, we'll have two models that we'll be querying now. This budget will be the one of them where we can get budget and forecast. And this guy here, call it NetSuite Actuals Income COGS OpEx. All this guy does, it unions your COGS and your OpEx with your income. And then just unions them here, and then just select star from both. So that's a basic union all there. So we have these two models that we can use, and we can point people to use that will have all the information that you need. And that's what we've done.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Thanks.
And it's good that everything's like tying out as well. I think, the interesting thing is it's taken us so long to get here, and then this last week we've done more work and gotten a lot further than we ever have. So I almost want to shed a tear just because like we're at the finish line, got to get it merged.
Yes.
And we can start doing it. Yeah.
Yes, we're right there. So from what we discussed, I think the only thing left for me to do is add that entity. Then I'll just double check everything again, make sure everything still ties. And then I think we should be good to get Taylor's eyes on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.